Hey, and welcome to this video where I'm going to show you my personal template that I use for live performance and for studio work. It's based loosely on the RapidFlow template, but it has a lot more third-party plugins added. Yeah, enough of the intro. Let me give you a quick demo of what it sounds like and give you an overview of how it works, and then we're going to dive into the details.
Space through the psyche, that's the plan. That is what light has made everything. Now swallow that.
Okay, I hope that gives you a quick overview of what you can do with this template. So let me take you through the details. I'm going to be using a couple of different views today to give you an overview of the control surfaces. I'm going to show you how to set all this up. I'm going to be showing you some frequency plots also, so you get a feeling for just how good and clean this sounds. That's me. Hello from Chile. Merry Christmas, where we're spending this winter. My sister got married, so we took the time to hang out here a bit. But back to matters at hand. So the template. How is this built up and what makes this unique? So basically, in this template, a lot of the stuff is done in session view, but you're not only confined to this. You can also use this to produce full tracks from beginning to end, and I'm going to show you how that all works. Let me just jump into Ableton here. So we have, in essence, 18 tracks at the top here that you can see, which are the tracks with which you have full control over everything that you're doing when you're using two controllers that have 8 faders each plus a master fader each. And the thing is, having a master fader on stage is pretty useless, so I assign those also 2 faders or 2 tracks in Ableton, so that you're able to then use them to affect your track. So what do we have going on here? We have kick drums, and this comes preloaded with RapidFlow kick drum sets, analog kick drums, as well as melodic techno kick drums. We have a track that is specifically tuned for bass synthesizers. This is just an audio track, so you can play your VSTs or your hardware into this. There's snares and claps, which comes preloaded again with sounds from RapidFlow, which is the electronic snares and claps. And then there are multiple tracks here with which you can create the harmonic and melodic elements. That starts here. You have a harmonics track, a melodics track, hooks, pads, atmospheric sounds, piano sounds. If you don't use pianos, just pop something else in there. And then if we move on over to this controller, you will see there is a hi-hat up, a hi-hat open, a hi-hat 16, a track for percussions, a track for toms or other groove elements, an extra track, which is extremely useful if you are putting sounds in that don't fit into any of these categories. In my case, they always end up there. Vocals, vocal chops go on here, and then here is some breakbeats. So at the very end here actually is still some samples, which were the wonderful samples from Carl Gustav Jung that I was playing at the beginning here. Let me show you.
Even rein does not sound at all.
So the cool thing about this is that all of these tracks are already set up and perfected so that you get a really good sound for its application. So if you go into these tracks, besides the instrument, you will find a lot of specific things going on. Like, for example, this Pro Q3 has a lot of tuning done already so that you can get the track to bed in quickly. And if you don't have some of the plugins that are being used, third-party plugins that are being used in this template, I've created backups using Ableton native stuff in most cases so that you can get a feel for how the templates sound, and then, yeah, you can get the plugins later on down the road if you want to. So As you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and what gets used across the whole template is console 1, because that is basically my high cut and low cut for almost every channel. And what I recommend you to get at least is the SSL 4000, which is the basic console 1, but if you can swing it, the Vice gets used a lot, the Vice channel strip, as well as the American Class A, which is amazing for sidechain. So those are the three that I use from Softube. So going back to this track, yeah, there's, for example, a Fabfilter Saturn here, which is bringing bass sounds more up front. Let me demo that to you quickly so you get an idea of just how good, yeah, this is tweaked so that it all works together. So let me remove the Saturn so you get a feeling for it. It immediately gets a little bit further in the background. This is an amazing preset actually that was shown to me by a friend of mine, Earthling Chelly, which is the Magic Mastering preset, which, yeah, with just a little bit of tweaking is wonderful to bring your bass more up front and actually also make it audible on small devices. It's adding some saturation. This is a super cool freeware called Ocular Scope, with which you can see in green here right now the kick drum, and in gray the bass. So you can see if you have any interference between them. And actually there's a little bit of stuff going on there, but not much, where the notes of the bass and the kick drum play at the same time. And the reason for that is that I'm using Shaper Box here to do a frequency dependent low cut on the bass track always, so that the kick can always play through cleanly. If you don't have Shaper Box, I've made a backup here using the Tremolo plugin from Ableton. Let me show you what it sounds like in comparison. So as you can see, there's a lot of little details already built into this template to make your life easier. And yeah, a lot of the heavy lifting on the mixing and mastering actually is done. So if I play you this template, just as an example where it's full tilt, which would be around here somewhere, let me give you an idea of yeah, just how loud and clean and punchy this sounds, and compare it also to some references. Okay, so I'm going to open up adapter AB, and this has two of my tracks in there so that I can, yeah, give you access to them basically for free, but you should load this with your reference tracks. And actually there's a nice little detail here. The referencing workflow is mapped to the cross AB on the crossfader on the Ableton APC, so it's very easy to jump between two tracks. Have a listen. So the Sanook track here was professionally mastered by Earthbound Mastering, who does an amazing job, Danielle. So yeah, you can basically have a look. The dynamics, everything, even though this is a track coming out of Ableton, it's very close to what you would expect for a final master for a track. Have a listen. Okay, let me keep moving through this template because we have a lot of ground to cover. Okay, so I'll go through all these channels in a sec, but I want to give you a bit more of a high-level overview first of what we have going on. So basically, all the instrument channels are being routed to a couple of destinations in the back here, which are these functional channels. They're either going to the super channel low or the normal super channel. Some exceptions are going to this channel called Bright, and what they're basically doing is molding the sound already of your tracks as a pre-master, so that when you send it to the mastering channel, which is here, everything already starts to sound really good, and you don't actually need to process individual sounds so much. So the mastering channel is the Earthbound mastering chain with some tweaks that I'm also going to take you through. It has some additional third-party plugins, but why do we now have 2 super channels? Well, the first super channel is doing everything you know from the super channel, which is a really easy way to interact with your music and do builds and drops. But we now have a second one, and everything that's kick drum, bass, toms, hi-hats and snares is going through here, so that when you add a lot of reverb to your synths or anything, your drums don't sound like the 80s. So let me show you. Which I realized at a certain point, it's just really nice to have those split up. So that's split. What else do we have going on these functional channels? Yes, we have the mastering chain here, of course, which is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And the cool thing is that when you want to send a finished track off to mastering, all you have to do is remove this block here, which is the final clipper and limiters, and you basically get a master. Let's have a look. Or a mixdown, I should say, that you can send off to mastering, which still has about 8 dB of headroom. Why 2 limiters? It sounds a lot better than using just one on the master. Okay, so moving along here. At the end here, we have some tracks which are basically like DJ track setups. You can drop in your finished in production tracks already here, and there's just like a basic low cut here that's also mapped somewhere here on the back of my controllers, so that it's really easy to also switch from a live set to a DJ set by just having your tracks lined up here, picking the one you want to do, and then using just 2 channels on the small controller to basically use it like a DJ mixer. So all of this I'm going to consider functional tracks. The Bright track actually has KUSH Clariphonic on it, which is unbelievable. I know it's not a super cheap plugin, but I can so recommend it because it just brings everything up front in a way that doesn't sound EQ'd. It's used in a couple of strategic places in the template. Don't touch it while you're playing live because it's not super stable. Sorry, Greg, but it crashed on me once during a set, so don't feel tempted to start tweaking it while you're playing. I have bad experiences with it, but if you leave it set like this, it doesn't cause problems. I would also not recommend to go over the 9 o'clock roughly, or maybe 10 o'clock, because it starts to sound a little bit too upfront and harsh sometimes. So that's the Bright channel, and you can send any channel or group of channels there if you're feeling they're getting too buried in the mix. You can even use it as something to pre-process sounds that you're going to be recording. So let me close this so we can make our lives a little bit simpler, because at the back here, we still have one more section, and that is these 8 channels here. And what these are for, and as you can see, I've removed the stop buttons on them, is that you can drop your risers, your impacts, reverse crashes, snare groove loops or breakbeats, top loops, shakers, and ride loops into these. And what I would recommend you to do is to have some sort of a little clip launcher like the Novation, what is it called? Something Mini Mark III, Launchpad Mini Mark III. And then have that to just be able to launch those kinds of sounds that you always need in tracks and also when you're playing live. And basically send them to one channel. And as you can see, the percussions fader is not only doing channel 13, but it's also affecting all these sounds in the back here. So you always have control while you're playing. And you can just trigger loops here and add in a nice little ride when you feel it, or a shaker. And it'll just keep running even when you switch to the next scene, because there is no stop buttons on these cells at the back here. Okay, and then finally at the very end here, we have our return effects, which utilize all kinds of really amazing plugins. For example, there's a Black Hole, Eventide Ultra Reverb. There's actually a basic Ableton delay. There's another Black Hole with some side chaining going on there, which is what makes up this really nice wash effect. Let me show you. So that sort of wave that came out at the back there, that's made over here. me take these down a little bit. Here is some more delays, and as you can see, I've captured some things here so that you're able to use these even if you don't have Valhalla delay, which probably everyone has, but I wanted to make this as accessible as possible. And yeah, there's all kinds of really nice delays going on in this template. This one, for example, is being used for the snare. I always find that the snare, it depends very much if you're in a very busy part of your track or if you're still building up. So I wanted to have more control over how I'm going to bed that into the track. So let me show you what I've done here. So there's actually two dedicated sends on the snare right here. I have a reverb and a snare delay, which is what I just showed you here. Have a look. And the snare is the snare reverb is the ultra reverb. So let me show you how I can make this snare change in the track. So yeah, I hope it gives you an idea. It's super easy. And yeah, a lot of these things are tweaked in such a way that it just, I hope I can say this sounds right. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, the things that you often need, like a nice short ambience on a snare with like a nice delay, so you can kind of make it a bit more groovy in certain parts. In the long demo that I made of this, playing actually in front of the Volcano Villarrica recently, I had a lot of fun playing with this set, and I'm going to link the full video below this also, or somewhere around here, so you can have a listen to how this set sounds. So you're basically able to get a master type quality out of this template. I'm just going to close some of these sections so we can go back to this, and I'm going to leave in this track of mine so that you can get an exact feeling for how loud things are, how I've created things, and how I actually play through a track sequence in the session view, so that it's really easy for you to really understand how to use this. So I'll probably just give you a quick high-level overview. I start up here. Move to the next scene, bring in the pad, move to the next scene, bring in the kick, and maybe bring in the bass. Bring in some hi-hats slowly. And this is also a nice little touch. There is a decay for all hi-hats, so you can make them either tight or more groovy in your track. So the hi-hats are based on Sonic Charge Microtonic, and the reason why I recommend using this is, well, it's kind of an industry standard. I've seen it being used by Kleine Musik, I've seen it being used by Stefan Botzin. It's just a really cool machine for making drums, specifically also hi-hats. And as you can see here, when I move the decay, it's opening the decay across all three instances. It's super easy to custom design hi-hat sounds that you like here. I'm not actually using the internal sequencer right now. If you do, the swing sounds amazing on it. It's worth having mapped somewhere. But because I want to have different hi-hats per track, I'm just using MIDI going to it. So there's three instances of it, and what you will see is, besides the console one doing some cleaning and removing some high and low frequencies so that it sits right in the mix, there is also Waves in-phase stereo, and I know that Waves is not a super popular plugin designer since the whole Waves debacle when they tried to enforce a subscription model on everyone, but this plugin is worth your hassle and time because it's a really nice way to adjust things in time without a hassle, and that actually stays when you bounce. If you do it using the Ableton thing that it has down here, it somehow doesn't actually maintain it, and it's much less intuitive than what I'm doing here. So let me show you what these sound like with and without. go to a place that's a bit more busy here.
But you see, that is...
Actually, that's not a good idea. Let's do it here. So let me show you. Let's have another listen just with this. So have a listen to the open height. I mean, it's not a lot, but that just makes it sit just a little bit nicer. And you can adjust this to your taste, right? You can make your hi-hats much later, or shuffled, or pull them up earlier if you're doing maybe stuff that has a more faster feel. It's just a really intuitive way to get your hi-hats to sit where you want. This is something I struggled with forever, and once I found this workflow, yeah, I was so happy because it made life much, much easier. So this is actually used across a lot of the drum tracks. I'm not sure if the snare, I don't think the snares have one. Oh, while we're here, there's something really cool I can show you here, which is the snare sculpt that I've created here, which is, I mean, let's go through one by one. We have, you can ignore this actually. Basically here's a whole bunch of really nice sounding snares and claps. There's a little bit of EQ, so you can just adapt it to your track very easily with just a couple of filters and a bell. But this snare sculpt here is really powerful. Let me show you why. Basically, I just put everything together that you always need when you're bedding a snare into a track. You have a low cut, high cut, the length of your reverb and your reverb mix. Then we have a limiter to protect your mix. And then this is a really nice little thing, which is the Pan Man from Soundtoys. And as you can see, it's not tempo synchronized. And the reason for this is listen to what it does with the stereo field of the snare. This is something also I discovered by coincidence, but I realized by destabilizing the stereo field of the snare a bit, it just always feels a bit more alive than just a one-hit snare sample that's just always hitting at the right, you know, at the same time, at the same place, in the same place in the stereo field. This way, it's always just like a bit more organic, and it just feels way nicer in the mix here. Have a quick listen. So yeah, really nice little trick, which is why I think also it's really worth having this plugin for that part of the workflow. Okay, what do we have going on? This is an important part. So all tracks in the template that you can see up here, so 1 through 18, all of them have a high cut filter that I've created using the Console 1 plugin. And I've mapped them over here on the, let me take you somewhere where we can actually have a look at it, on the harmonics track. I've mapped them on these 8 rotaries on the APC, because then that way you have a really easy way to affect the density of your mix and how things are coming in and out of your mix when you're starting scenes. So these ones basically correspond to these tracks. So even like maybe sometimes your bass is too up front the way you recorded it, and you're on the PA, you're like, it doesn't sound right, or your kick is just a little bit too hard for the vibe you're going for. It's super easy to adjust that. So let me take this mix, let's say down harmonically, and show you how easy it is to change it. So as you can hopefully tell, I can go like kind of to like running the full track, but in a very subdued way, and then I can start to open it up. you'll find console ones doing this across every channel. I'm dedicating these rotary encoders for these channels. It's something that I found, well, I mean, you know, low pass filters are the thing that's kind of most used in dance music. So it's really nice to have a dedicated fader for it on every channel. And it means that I don't actually have to schlep around the console one soft hardware, which is nice for the studio, but way too big and heavy for the road. Yeah, so what else do we have here? We have the harmonics track. Oh, and there's a tuner in here called Lock-On that I can highly recommend. It's the best tuner I found for synthesizers. It's way more accurate than the Ableton tuner. So if you're using hardware synths, it's on every track. It's the best one, and it's actually for free. You can buy it also to support the company, which I've done, but I haven't installed yet. Because it's an amazing tuner and I never wanted to lose access to it in case they somehow switch off the freeware or something. So this is on every track. You can see there's a console one on every track. And for example, let's have a look at this pad sound here. I think I've put it. Yeah, there it is. Let's have a listen. So this pad sound is realized using the sidechain of the console one, which just sounds super incredible. Here, let me show it to you quickly. Here we go. So as you can see, it's pumping away here, and this is getting its sidechain from the external sidechain, which is a track called Key in the template. And it's by far the nicest sidechain I found groove-wise for electronic music. Let me show you. Let me bypass it for a sec. Okay, so sidechain, and the key signal is coming from these functional tracks here in the red, which is basically just a kick drum sample that's being sent really loud throughout the whole template. So you can add a sidechain anywhere in your project using console one and this key track. That's going to sound really nice and like really in time with your whole template, even if you're in a break and you're not actually running your kick drum to sidechain off of. Okay, what else do we have going on here? There's a couple of delay variations. Some of these are being switched on and off in the clips. So if you want to use a different delay than the one that I've used, you can go here to envelopes. You can go here to, for example, chop pad delay. And you see here, there's an automation that in this clip, that delay is going to be on. And if I move to some other clip, it may actually be off. Yeah, you see, there is no automation there. So I've changed which delays I use for which sounds in which track as I progress through the session view. And you can switch in and out delay and tremolo blocks and everything like that to your taste using automation, or, you know, replace all this with stuff that you like. But these delays and stuff are a really nice starting point, I think, for you to get going. What else do we have in here? Yeah, more delays. There's some utilities. One thing that you may have noticed is the tracks sound correct when all the faders are up, because it's a really easy place to get back to when you're on stage. So it just makes life much, much easier. Let me just check that everything is sort of in the right place here-ish. Okay, good. It just makes everything much, much easier when you're on stage to not have to try to fidget your levels to the right place, but you can just put everything up and you know it's going to sound correct. So as you can see, if all this is up, then yeah, it basically sounds correct. And the way that I've done that is by using some utilities, etc., so that these gains can be at the top and not blow out your channels. There's also utilities often at the beginning of a channel. If you find that a sample you have or a sound you have is way too loud, just drop its level using its gain here, or add a utility to the beginning of this. You can use the console 1 also, just to make sure that you're not going to get too much level. So if you look, my kick track is, even with the fader at the top, peaking at -9. That's with full processing. Without the fader boost, it's at -15, and that's what I would recommend you to keep as a reference level, and then build out everything else, and then it'll sound really good in the template. Okay, moving along here so that this does not get too long. Yeah, so, you know, all of these have different variations. Like, you know, a pad track will have a pretty high low cut not to clog up your mix, as does this atmospherics track here. This piano track is mapped over here to the master. I actually use it also sometimes for very different sound, like this hooky sound here.
But you see, that is side aspect.
So in this case, it's being used here. Okay, what else do we have going on in the template here? Okay, the hi-hats we've covered, percussion track we've covered, or not yet, but I mean, it's just a percussion track with a relatively high low-cut filter. I actually use this view for console 1 a lot. It's really easy to map to. Yeah, it's much faster than opening up plugins all the time. That's what I like a lot about console 1 also, besides that it sounds great, is you get all the basic elements you need to process almost any signal in one thing. And as you can see, for example, here's a little tweak that I've made this extra wide. Here's the toms channel. This has a Pro Q3 on it, which has sort of a cuts going on because toms tend to fight with the bass a lot or cause a lot of mud. And actually, if you look on my controllers here, let me go to that so I can show it to you better. There's a couple of things already that I've mapped out. So all of these are high cuts for these channels. But here is the snare reverb and the snare delay that I demoed for you before. And here's the kick low, bass low, and tom low. So these three, when they're at 12 o'clock, it means that my mix is not being touched. But if I, for example, find that my toms are overpowering the mix, I have a dedicated low cut here, which, let me show you. So with this, I can affect how much of my tom's low end is going to get through to the mix, which is really useful if you're playing on a PA that is not happy maybe with your mix was too bassy. The same is happening over here on this. And the same is happening on this Pro Q3 for the kick drum. So with these, it's really easy to sculpt your mix and to just make sure that things are working well together while you're playing live. This is not really something for production, but more when you're playing live, just to make sure that, that things are working well, even if the PA has too much or too little bass. The toms, the bass, and the kick drum, you can easily boost or cut using these, let me go take you over here quickly again, using these three dedicated faders. So you have your low end kind of under control here without having to open plugins or do anything, which has turned out to be super useful. Similar like the snare. I'm sure at some point this is going to be super full with all kinds of other controls, but I mean, right now these are the only rotaries on my template that aren't used. And this one is actually used as well. These are the high cuts, as I mentioned, and this one here is actually for the sample, it's de-esser, so that if a sample is harsh, you can de-ess it really quickly using that. So there's only just a couple of rotaries left here that are actually still free. Okay, going back to the template here, what else do we have going on? On this microtonic, you can see how this decay here is mapped. It's the same for all of these channels. The decays are mapped. The maximum amount varies. The open hi-hat can go way longer than the up and the closed hi-hat. Actually, the up hi-hat can go way far as well. So just map this to your taste. And there's a nice little trick that if you want to map something like this, you can set how far it's able to reach using this here, so that you can adjust if you want your rotary to affect the opening of a hi-hat decay a lot or just a little range. So really nice, something to play with where you can customize this to your own sound. And because all of this is in plugins, of course you can make this your own. You know, you have a basic foundation here that you can start with that will sound really good. It's really intuitive to play with and in the studio. But of course the idea is that you turn this into your own and adjust things to your own taste and to the style of music that you're making. I don't want to make this video too long, so I think, you know, already now we've covered a lot of what is in here. I think once you start going through here, you're going to find, you know, a lot of little details and tweaks. But the cool thing is you can just play through this track, map your controller according to what things are being used for. So let me show you that quickly, just so that you really know how to map things here. I always have my controller set to remote. And as you can see, this is what I've mapped here right now. So the way that the mapping works is you have high cuts on all the basic channels. So kick, bass, snare, harmonics, melodic stuff, hooks, pads, atmospheric sounds. And if you go into these channels, you'll find a console 1 that has a high cut. You just say Apple M for mapping stuff. And in this case, I want to map something off of, for example, the kick drum. I'm going to take the high cut of the kick drum and just erase it, click it, map it to this rotary here, and that's it. Now I can high cut my kick drum. And you just do that for every channel. If I wanted to do the same for the bass, I just go in here, hit Control M or Apple M again. I'm just going to erase it, click again, and I'm going to map my bass now to it. So now already I have my kick and my bass being able to be managed from right over here, which I think I found is the most useful thing to do with this. If you're actually not on a plugin or a channel where it's mapped, these become macros again. So you can use it on your macro, but it's really nice to have dedicated high cuts for all the main signals. And the same with these buttons, you map them to the high cut on the hi-hat up, hi-hat open. Let me take you over here to the closer view of this so you can see it a bit better. So yeah, here's your kick, bass, snare, harmonics, melodics, hooks, pads, atmospheric sounds, hi-hat up, hi-hat open, hi-hat 16, percussion high cut, groove high cut, extra sounds high cut, vocal chops, vocals high cut, breakbeat high cut. And this one is just used for sample, or I use it for loop cloud when I'm producing also. And that actually has a de-esser amount on this mapped over here. As I showed you before, here's your kick low EQ, bass low EQ, tom low EQ, snare reverb and snare delay send. These are happening off of the snare channel. Let me show you where. If you go to snare and you hit Option Command S, you can see the sends. And again, you just map that send to your snare reverb, that send to your snare delay. So it's just very simple. You know, you just go in there, click it, rotate the right encoder, and then you have that mapped already. That's it. Everything else, oh, very important, almost forgot. What you also need to map is in the red channel, the super channel. So the super channel has evolved a bit over time, and not all these macros are being used anymore. I've left them for backwards compatibility, but this is an important bit. So these up here are your live performance, basically like DJ effects. So the low cut and the high cut are still being used as you would think. So all you have to do is do mapping, hit the filter, and then you can map low cut. Over here you can map high cut, and that will give you a low cut and a high cut on your whole mix. And you need to do the same for the super channel low. High cut, low cut, where your drums are being sent to, so that you can high cut your whole mix with one rotary encoder. You see that? So in this case, this high cut rotary encoder is being sent to 2 destinations at the same time. That's actually all that is on this super channel low. It started out just for kick and bass, but now I'm sending hi-hats and snares, everything there too. And then we get to the interesting stuff. This wash should be realized on send D. So you hit Apple M, just gonna wipe that, click on it, assign wash, you see? Now, when I am playing my track, let me give it a go. That's that nice kind of wash, sort of sidechained reverb wash sound. Let me show you again. And the reason why it sounds out after I close it is because it's being used as a send effects. The same with the reverb. We're using this send here, so that's what's mapped off of this encoder, that's verb. Delay 1 and delay 2 are actually being used inside the super channel. You could theoretically also map that somewhere here if you prefer, but I'm quite happy having them just at the back here. And then there's just some utilities here that are not actually being used right now. The decay is mapped to the decay parameter as I showed you before on Microtonic to give your track a different kind of groove. And as you can see, the range differs a little bit per channel the way I've set it up, but you know, you should do this to your taste. And then there's a high cut actually that ended up over here from this piano channel, you see that? Because I had one rotary left over and it was kind of closest to the master fader. Now, a really nice thing that I've realized I've done recently, and I think then we're going to be pretty much done, is in electronic music, at least to my taste, I really like it when the whole track's going and then you can go to a place where it's just kick, bass, maybe the snare and maybe one harmonic element and all the percussions and the hi-hats and everything kind of drops out. So like a deep part. And I've realized a way to do that so that you can get to that kind of a sound and vibe anytime. Let me show you how that sounds like. The way that you do that is very simple. You click on all the sounds that you would want to stop at that place. So for example, break beats, all this stuff can go. Atmospheric sounds, I think, are actually quite nice to keep. And now when I'm playing, let me show you. I think I would also recommend, or I would like to have the snare drop out at that point. So I'm going to map that as well there. Let me show you. So as you saw, with just one stop button here, and I'm not using these ever in my set, I'm able to stop sort of all the percussive, all the high frequency stuff can just be stopped in one click, which is also a really nice function. So one other thing I would recommend to you is very often when you're playing, you're not going to be able to see the colors here, which is why everything is set up in scenes. And there is some color coding here, like this is where the kick comes in, toms, hi-hats, bass, but I've had it very many times that I was playing at a festival outdoor and I couldn't see any colors. So what I've come to do is I'll start my track like this, play through these scenes, and when I'm at the last scene, I'll just skip one line down, and this is always the button that I start clips with. Let me just check that I'm showing you the right thing here still. Yeah, so this is always the button that's going to take me to the next scene, and as soon as I've clicked it, I move on to the next scene, so I'm always ready to go. Let me show you. So it's just a really foolproof way to just have only one button to toggle yourself through your project. If you're trying to do this with all the layers and all the different scene clip launchers, and it happens to be sun is shining on your controller, like actually happened also in the demo I was making of this that I've linked below this. Yeah, like you have no idea which was the one you were on again 2 minutes ago. So I would really recommend to look at it that way. Hey everyone, this is Editing Erik. I actually forgot to take you through the mastering channel. So this is Earthbound Daniel Zuderberg's mid-side mastering chain, which is included here. And the beginning of it is pretty much the same as everything that you've seen so far. But I've added a KUSH clariphonic. There's the two bus compressor options that Daniel built. there is a primary clipper here which is just taking care of some of the level so that it doesn't overwhelm what follows, and this is what I've added. And I'm going to clone these so that we can try to approximate these with Ableton plugins. So if you don't own these plugins, you're going to have something sounding similar. But when I put these on my master chain, I realized they add so much analog vibe and mojo. Like, they don't sound like a clean compressor and a clean EQ. They actually sound, really, really nice, and round out the edges and make it a bit larger than live. It has some really nice saturation in here. But these plugins somehow add something really magical to the main output signal. They're a permanent fixture now on my mastering chain. So they're included also with correct settings. There is then a secondary clipper that again just compresses the signal a little bit, so that, and actually this one also has soft clipping on, so that the limiters then only have very little limiting that they need to do, as you can see here. The cool thing is, if you want to send a track to mastering, all you have to do is switch off this block here. So really easy, you just take that off, and then they can master it, keeping all the sculpting elements that you have in your mix. It's already all set up in such a way that it'll sound super nice. This whole mid-side EQ that Daniel did in here is fantastic. It just adds so much to the mix. Just touch on adapter AB in case you haven't used this plugin. It has this fantastic, you can drop in your reference tracks, and then it has this fantastic function here of layered, where you can see your reference track in orange and your actual track in production in blue. I almost forgot, this pedal here is actually stuck into the back of the APC right there. And what it does, if I'm playing and I've done some crazy stuff on the super channel and I want to get back to the kick in the bass, and I'm not going to have time to rotate a ton of rotary encoders, I can push this pedal, and what it does is, on the super channel, it bypasses the entire super channel effects. You see over here, when I click this, it just bypasses them. So everything is off, and I can take my time to take the faders or the rotary encoders to their neutral position. And once it's done, I can let go and nothing will change with the sound. So here's another little detail I saw that I've missed. If you're wondering why some of the tracks in the template have these little triangles, it's something really cool that I learned from a friend of mine called Follow Action. So the problem is that when you're skipping through these launchers, if you're playing a sound file, it'll just cut off as soon as the next scene starts. However, if you set Follow Action to go to next, it will maintain its place, in this case, in this sample. Let me show it to you. And actually will continue playing from that place in the sample on the next clip. So you see how it kept going there? And you can do this also with, for example, long takes of synthesizers where maybe the filter's opening up, and when you go to the next scene, you want that to keep going. And what I do on the last one is Follow Action Previous, so it cycles between these in case your sample is about to run out before you're actually ready to move to the next scene. So yeah, super useful function that actually solved a lot of problems with moving through scenes to build up a track. The final thing that I would like to show you is something that I have in the template, which is nice to have, which is, well, I mean, there's a safety limiter on the main output, and there's adapter AB, which I've recommended in numerous videos, and I've created this crossfader AB, so it's a really nice way to flip. Nice to have is the Flux sample grabber. Let me show you what that looks like. So it gives me a lot of very useful information. Like when it's just peaking here, I know it's loud enough for live performance. I can see if my VU meters are at the right place. I can see my true peak levels, and I can see if my frequency range is falling down smoothly as I would like it. I can see how wide the channel or the whole track is, and I can see the witness according to frequencies. So up here, wide, good. Down here, wide, probably not so good, depending on a bit. So yeah, super nice metering plugin. I can't recommend it enough. And then the other thing that I have in here, which is totally not a must-have, but I'm going to show you quickly also the gear that I use in a second. And if you're using the III wireless headphones, which are amazing for performing and also for, you know, playing in things in your studio because there's no cable, they don't really sound super flat in my experience, or at least not compared to VSX, which is my monitoring reference. So I've created a profile in Sound ID reference, which basically makes them more flat or closer to what VSX headphones sound like. I'm going to share this file also, and then I monitor through VSX normally. And my main room is Howie Weinberg. Let me show you what that sounds like. Now with the processing. So can be a bit jarring. This is nice to have, but if you want a monitoring on VSX, I can highly recommend it. And if you're using III headphones, I'm going to throw in this curve, and the headphones are part of the Sound ID reference, but I've adjusted the curve by switching between both headphones so that I can get it really close. They were a little bit duller than what it shows here. So yeah, that's totally nice to have, but highly recommended because I can mix and master using just one pair of headphones. I used to travel with 2 pairs of headphones sometimes, which was a bit annoying. So yeah, all of the stuff here is nice to have. You don't absolutely need it, but yeah, if you want to produce on the road or if this is your main monitoring system, a really nice way to go. Yeah, so maybe as a last thing, let me show you the gear that I use and travel with. Okay, actually, I'm going to give you a quick shot of the view from here. Yeah, we're super lucky right now to be in this wonderful Airbnb here in the coast of Chile, where I'm recording this for you. Here we go. Now it's no longer mirrored. Okay, so as you, I'm sure, have noticed, the APC 40 Mark II is my main controller, and it seems like Akai has started producing these again. These were available a couple of weeks ago on various online stores. I can highly recommend this. I have 2, I have a backup. It's just super versatile. It's very dedicated to Ableton. It's a really, really good controller and has a clip launcher, has a lot of rotary encoders. It's been pretty solid. I actually have a video how you can fix this in case it causes trouble on my channel. And then I have here the Akai MIDI Mix, which I can also totally recommend, especially because this, you can assign the MIDI CCs to all of these, because out of the factory, these 2 clash and some of these overlap. I'll also provide the file with which you can load this device so that none of the controllers overlap anymore and you can use everything individually. My main audio interface is this PreSonus Quantum 2, which connects to my computer via Thunderbolt, which makes it way more low latency than any other interface on the market to my knowledge. It sounds really good. It's super reliable and solid, and I'm able to monitor through Ableton. So any synths I record, I hear through Ableton with full effects, and I can record them exactly as they're going to sound in the track, which is not something I ever want to miss. Unfortunately, the new Quantum series from PreSonus are no longer Thunderbolt, and they're not as fast latency-wise as they used to be, so I can highly recommend picking one of these up. This is the transmitter for the III headphones. It's so nice to not have a cable, and now that I've fixed the frequency on them to be closer to VSX, I'm not missing them anymore. And then, yeah, this is my MacBook, which is a M1 MacBook Pro Max, yes, with 64 gigs of RAM, 4 terabytes of hard disk space. I would definitely also have managed with 32 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes of hard disk space. But yeah, like this machine, as you can see, I'm recording this now. It's playing Ableton. Sometimes I stream at the same time as I'm doing this with multiple 4K streams. It's way powerful enough for any kind of audio work you want to do. And then up here is actually my trusty Olympus OMD 1 Mark II camera, which never overheats. It's super tiny. These are pretty affordable. You can get them pretty cheap. I'm using a 12-40 millimeter Micro Four Thirds Pro lens with it, and it has a little power adapter, so I don't have to think about battery life. Yeah, that is my setup, and something I can highly recommend if you're looking at something that works both in the studio and for live performance. And that's it. We've done it. We've covered everything. I know this was a lot, but yeah, it's like a super advanced workflow with pretty advanced controller setup, pretty advanced mixing and mastering stuff, all in one. Everything I produce, I do in this template. So when I'm done with a track, I just keep going further down and add more lines and bring in further sounds that I record mostly out of hardware in my studio, but you can record using plugins also. And what I would recommend is just put whatever sound it is that you want to record on record monitor through that channel. Send your plugin or your hardware synth through there, listen to how it's going to sound exactly in the mix, and when it's right, the level, everything, the EQing and whatever, then record it. And then when you press play afterwards, it's going to just sound like that and be done. And then finally, what you can do is use this to create a track sequence in real time. Let me give you a very quick overview of how that would work. So I'm just going to hit record in the arrange view.
Even Rhein doesn't understand that respect, because it is a relativation. Now I'm going to say something which in these sacred rooms is anathema. A relativation of time and space through the psyche. That is what I have made now swallow that.
Well, that's something cool. Well, may I go further and tell me your recent work?
So if I now switch over to this view here, I'm just going to switch off the automation so it'll be easier for you to see, and I'm going to switch off show take lanes. Basically, you can see that I've now created the layout that could become a sequence for me to build out into a track. And you can just do this in live performance as many times as you need until you get something that you really like, and do it in a very organic, very nice feeling way, just by trusting your intuition and where it is that you want to go with your track. Okay, a lot of stuff we've gone through here, so I'm gonna leave it here. If you have questions, please put them in the comments below. Check out the live set that I played using this, and actually all those tracks were recorded in my studio retreat in Portugal in July of this year. It was 1 week. It's actually all streamed on YouTube. I'm gonna link it also so you can have a look at me making those tracks if you want. See me using exactly this template also in the studio. And yeah, I hope that this will make it way faster and easier for you to produce your music, to get really good results fast, to get amazing sounding mixes fast. I've been in this now for 25 years, and I know what a struggle it was to get things to sound right in the beginning. I have bought dozens and dozens of plugins that I ended up not needing. So even though there is a lot of plugins on this template, I wish these were the plugins I'd gotten from the beginning, because each of them does something really special that's not easy to replicate with onboard plugins of Ableton. And yeah, before you ask, I'm not going to recreate this for other DAWs because I'm an Ableton guy, and yeah, the amount of work to make it would be insane. So this is it. If you don't use Ableton, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to offer you my personal template. We do have the Infinity Bundle and the Rapid Flow template on multiple DAWs, FL Studio, Bitwig, and Logic, which sounds very close to this, but yeah, it's not using third-party plugins. We're running an introduction launch price sale on this product until New Year's. I think this is a really good deal because you're getting a lot of really condensed workflow and sound engineering knowledge and template that you can do anything you want with, because none of it is like baked in loops. All the sound engineering is right there for you to see. And yeah, the workflow that I've shown you today, both for playing live and for producing in the studio, I think is super powerful and way more fun than moving blocks around across the screen, which is how I also used to do it. So I hope that this template gives you joy. I hope that it helps you play on some amazing festivals or clubs. I hope it helps you make a lot of really, really cool, good sounding music. And I will see you on the next video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.